Social justice and progressive ideology is being pushed into our educational system. Instead of focusing on core fundamental skills that will help our children prepare for a competitive world, such as maths, problem solving, critical thinking, innovation, and creativity, the powers that be seem to think that indoctrination is more important. Only a few weeks ago, the Royal Society of Chemistry published an article in their Chemistry World magazine titled "Working Towards an Australian First Nations Periodic Table." This is the existing periodic table, a fundamental tool in chemistry and other sciences, enabling universal communication about elements and their properties. So why do we need a First Nations version? In the article, they of course can't help but mention, when the British invaded Australia in 1788, the associated massacres, starvation, new diseases, loss of land, and breaking up of families suppressed and in some cases destroyed much Indigenous culture and knowledge. What's that got to do with chemistry? They continue, so-called Western chemistry has really come from Indigenous knowledge about the natural world. In reality, Aboriginal people developed their own knowledge of the chemical elements and their compounds. This includes uranium in its mineral form, which they called sickness rocks. I can imagine it now. When Australia builds its first nuclear power plant, the Australian-trained nuclear fuel technicians will be like, "Hey Bill, I'm all out of sickness rocks. Can you grab us a fresh load?" The article also states, Aboriginal Australians have been using the iron oxide-based pigment ochre for at least 50,000 years. Ochre is used as a pigment and it can be formed into different colours, which is material science. It can be used as a disinfectant, as a sunscreen. I can imagine it now. Ochre being used as a disinfectant to clean the hospital floor. And a happy family wearing ochre at the beach instead of sunscreen. Who needs modern science when you have ochre? Of course, the Australian curriculum has been updated to cater for this new woke world. According to their website, the Australian curriculum gives special attention to 3 cross-curriculum priorities: Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia, and sustainability. Shadow Minister for Education, Senator Sarah Henderson, recently led an analysis of the new curriculum, with the Australian reporting, "Indigenous culture in maths? Count on it. The classroom is for education, not indoctrination, and I'm concerned the cross-curriculum priorities are motivated more by ideological causes than what is in the best interests of children." The Daily Mail reported, Aussie maths teachers will be expected to incorporate Indigenous dance and storytelling into lessons. Apparently, there are 2,451 lesson suggestions in the new curriculum, 3/4 of which relate to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and culture. I decided to have a look at the curriculum myself. This is their website. This is the latest version, 9.0. They allow you to explore and download all the latest curriculum. For example, Year 2 Maths, using First Nations Australian stories and dances to understand the balance and connection between addition and subtraction. Year 5 Technology, when learning about binary representation in computing, making collaboratively a long thread with beads representing binary for the letters that spell the country place name in the local First Nations language and English, and could be displayed as a binary banner as an acknowledgement of country that we are on the traditional lands of the peoples. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. This is undeniably indoctrination, is it not? Year 9 Statistics, exploring potential cultural bias relating to First Nations Australians by critically analysing sampling techniques in statistical reports. They even somehow slip Arabic and First Nations into the same activity for Years 1 and 2. Exploring symbols and languages used by First Nations Australians and by Arabic-speaking communities in a range of contexts, for example, identifying the colours of flags in Arabic and discussing what the colours represent in English. What the hell has First Nations got to do with the Arabic-speaking community? I just don't get it. And we're expecting 5-year-olds to understand this? Year 2 English. If you think English has nothing to do with First Nations, you'd be wrong. Exploring First Nations Australian cultural protocols in Welcome to Country and Acknowledgement of Country and the greeting words used by local First Nations Australians for Year 2 students. And just one more. For foundation year, so prep students who are like 4 years old, for physical education, exploring similarities and differences in family structures in First Nations Australian communities and other cultures. That's for PE? Can't they just kick a football around like every other kid in the world? Just to be clear, I'm not saying we should never teach Aboriginal culture and history. Of course we should. We all live on this same land and should learn about its history. However, it should not be at the cost of the core educational skills. Maths, problem solving and critical thinking will help our students succeed in life. Teaching them about the rainbow serpent, although interesting, is not going to get them a job. The Courier Mail published a good piece. Students need to learn about Indigenous culture and history, but it must not come at the expense of the core curriculum. Maths classes must include Indigenous storytelling, reconciliation plans, and even traditional weaving. What's Indigenous weaving got to do with maths equations? It's almost like they're forcing Indigenous culture into things it just doesn't align with. If as a society we decide that we need to learn about Aboriginal culture, fine, but pretending it has anything to do with trigonometry is just plain silly.